In the vast emptiness of space, where civilizations rise and fall like distant stars, there exists a universal truth that even the most advanced species struggle to understand. Sometimes the greatest power lies not in conquest or technology, but in the simple act of caring for something that others have abandoned. Marcus Chun had always believed that every broken thing deserved a chance to fly again. He never imagined that this philosophy would save not just a dying alien ship, but reshape the destiny of an entire warrior race that had forgotten what it meant to hope. What happens when humanity's greatest strength isn't our weapons or our intellect, but our stubborn refusal to let anything stay broken? The salvage yard on Kepler Station stretched for miles in every direction, a graveyard of dreams and broken promises floating in the cold vacuum of space. Twisted metal hulks drifted slowly in their designated zones, each one telling a story of adventure gone wrong, of battles lost, of crews that never made it home. Marcus Chun had seen them all in his 15 years working the yards, but nothing had prepared him for what he found in Section 7 Delta that Tuesday morning. The ship was enormous, easily 3 times the size of any human vessel he'd ever worked on. Its hull was a deep silver blue that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and, despite the obvious damage along its port side, there was something magnificent about its design. Elegant curves swept from nose to tail, giving it the appearance of some great predator frozen in mid-leap. But what caught Marcus's attention wasn't the ship's beauty or its alien origin. It was the faint pulse of light emanating from what looked like its bridge. "Computer, bring up the salvage records for this vessel," Marcus said, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air of his maintenance pod. Vessel designation unknown. Origin, Lickery Empire. Acquisition date, 14 months ago. Salvage rights, abandoned by original recovery crew after preliminary assessment. Current status, condemned for scrap processing. Marcus frowned. 14 months was a long time for a ship to sit untouched in the yards, especially one this size. The scrap value alone should have made it a priority. He maneuvered his pod closer, using the external sensors to scan the hull. What he found made him whistle low under his breath. The ship wasn't just damaged, it was dying. But not in the way most wrecks died, from catastrophic structural failure or system collapse. This ship was dying slowly, like a great animal that had crawled away to expire in solitude. Its power core was operating at less than 2% capacity, barely enough to maintain life support in what appeared to be a single compartment near the center of the vessel. Someone was still alive in there. Marcus had seen enough death in the salvage yards to recognize the signs of a ship's final moments. The way the emergency lights pulsed in irregular patterns, the subtle list to starboard as internal gravity failed section by section, the gradual cooling of the hull as heating systems shut down one by one. This ship had maybe days left, possibly hours. Computer, scan for life signs. Scanning. One life form detected. Species unknown. Vital signs weak, but stable. Marcus stared at the readouts on his screen. Whoever was in there had been alone for over a year, watching their ship slowly die around them, waiting for a rescue that was never coming. The thought made his stomach clench with a familiar anger. The same anger he'd felt as a kid when he'd found abandoned animals on the streets of New Shanghai, left to fend for themselves while the world moved on without them. Computer, establish communication with the vessel. Unable to establish communication. Ship's communication array appears to be non-functional. Of course it was. Marcus sighed and began running a full diagnostic of the alien ship systems. What he found painted a grim picture. The ship's main reactor had been damaged in whatever accident had brought it here, causing a cascade failure that had knocked out everything from weapons to waste recycling. The survivor inside was living on emergency reserves that were designed to last maybe a week, not 14 months. But here was the thing that got Marcus's attention. The ship's computer was still trying to repair itself. Even with power levels that should have forced it into complete shutdown mode, it was still running repair subroutines, still attempting to bring damaged systems back online. It was like watching someone continue to fight even after they'd lost everything they had to fight for. Marcus pulled up the salvage authorization codes on his personal tablet. As a senior technician, he had the authority to perform basic repairs on vessels awaiting processing. But what this ship needed was far beyond basic. It needed a complete reactor rebuild, hull welding, system replacement, and probably a dozen other major repairs that would take weeks to complete. He looked back at the ship floating in front of him, its lights pulsing weakly in the darkness. The smart thing to do would be to report the life sign to station security and let them handle it. They'd probably extract the survivor and add the ship to the processing queue. It would be stripped for parts within a month, its unique design and alien technology absorbed into the collective knowledge base of human engineering. But Marcus had never been particularly smart when it came to following regulations. Computer, transfer full salvage rights for this vessel to my personal account. Authorization code Chun77 Alpha. Unable to process request. Vessel exceeds personal salvage limits by approximately 400%. Marcus gritted his teeth. He'd forgotten about the size restrictions on personal salvage claims. But there were other ways to skin a cat, as his grandfather used to say. Computer, reclassify vessel as emergency rescue situation. Begin immediate humanitarian aid protocols. Processing. Reclassification approved. Emergency protocols activated. You now have temporary operational authority over this vessel for rescue purposes. That bought him maybe 48 hours before station management started asking questions. It would have to be enough. Marcus began suiting up for EVA work. If he was going to save the ship and whoever was inside it, he needed to get aboard and assess the damage firsthand. The maintenance pod's airlock cycled through its sequence, and soon he was drifting across the void toward the alien vessel, his toolkit maglocked to his belt and his head full of half-formed plans. The ship's hull was even more impressive up close. The metal had a strange quality to it, almost organic in the way it curved and flowed. Marcus ran his gloved hand across its surface and felt a faint vibration, as if the ship was purring like some massive cat. He found what looked like an airlock near the rear of the vessel, and was surprised when it responded to his approach, cycling open with a soft hiss of equalizing atmosphere. The interior of the ship was a study in contrasts. The corridors were wide and high-ceilinged, designed for beings much larger than humans, but the lighting was warm and soft, giving the whole place an almost cozy feeling despite its size. Emergency strips provided just enough illumination for Marcus to navigate, their amber glow reflecting off walls that seemed to be made of the same organic-looking metal as the hull. He followed the signs of habitation, scratches on the walls, worn patches on the deck plating, the faint smell of something cooking, until he reached what appeared to be the ship's bridge. The doors were sealed, but when he placed his hand on what looked like a control panel, they slid open with surprising smoothness. The being inside was not what Marcus had expected. He'd seen plenty of alien species during his time on Kepler Station. Most were humanoid, though with variations in size, coloring, and number of limbs. But the creature sitting in the captain's chair was something else entirely. It was massive, easily 7 feet tall even while seated, with broad shoulders and long arms that ended in hands tipped with what looked like claws. Its face was distinctly canine, with a long snout full of sharp teeth and eyes that glowed a soft amber in the dim light. A wolf, Marcus realized. An alien wolf. The being looked up as Marcus entered, and for a moment they simply stared at each other. Then the alien spoke, its voice a deep rumble that seemed to come from somewhere around its chest. "You are not Lickery," it said in accented but understandable English. "No," Marcus replied, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "I'm human. My name is Marcus Chun. I work salvage on this station." The alien's ears flattened against its skull. "Salvage. Yes, I suppose that is what this has become." It gestured weakly at the failing systems around them. "I am Kethvar of the Broken Fawn clan. I am the captain of this vessel." "What happened to you?" Marcus asked, settling into what looked like a secondary chair. How long have you been here? Kethvar's laugh was bitter. Time has little meaning when you are dying slowly. But, by your station's chronometer, perhaps 14 of your months? 15? I stopped counting after the food recyclers failed. You've been surviving on emergency rations for over a year? Emergency rations ran out after the first month. I have been creative in finding sustenance. Kethvar's stomach chose that moment to growl loudly, and Marcus winced at the hollow sound. What happened to your ship? Kethvar's expression darkened. Betrayal. Abandonment. Cowardice. Choose whichever word pleases you most. Human. The result is the same. He leaned back in his chair, his amber eyes fixed on something Marcus couldn't see. My clan sent me to negotiate a trade agreement with the Zalandi Republic. Simple cargo runs, nothing controversial. But when we arrived at the rendezvous point, we found Zalandi warships instead of merchants. You were ambushed, outgunned, outnumbered. My ship was badly damaged, my crew. Kethvar's voice faltered for a moment. My crew was killed. All of them. I managed to escape into hyperspace, but the reactor was failing. I barely made it to this system before everything shut down. Marcus felt his anger rising again. And no one came looking for you? Oh, they came, Kethvar said with another bitter laugh. 3 months after I sent my distress signal, a Lickery search vessel arrived. They found me, assessed my situation, and declared my ship a total loss. They offered to evacuate me, but he trailed off, looking away. But returning home would mean facing the clan council, explaining how I lost an entire crew and a ship worth more than most planets, admitting that I had failed in my duty. Kethvar's claws extended slightly, scraping against the arms of his chair. Among my people, such failures are not easily forgiven. It would have been better to die here, with honor, than to live with such shame. Marcus stared at him. So you chose to stay here and die slowly instead of going home. It seemed appropriate. A captain should go down with his ship, as you humans say. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, Marcus said bluntly. Kethvar's ears snapped upright, and his lips pulled back to reveal a mouth full of fangs. You dare insult my honor? Your honor? Marcus stood up, his own anger finally boiling over. What honor is there in sitting here, feeling sorry for yourself, while your ship dies around you? What honor is there in giving up? You want to know what I see when I look at your ship? I see something beautiful that's been neglected and abandoned, something that could fly again if someone just gave a damn about it. Kethvar rose as well, towering over the human. This ship is beyond repair. The reactor core is cracked, the hull is compromised, the life support systems have been failing for months. Even if it could be repaired, I lack the resources, the crew, the will. Marcus interrupted. That's what you lack. The will to try. They faced off across the bridge, human and alien, both breathing hard. Finally, Kethvar sat back down, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Perhaps you are right, he said quietly. Perhaps I'm simply a coward hiding behind honor. Marcus felt his anger drain away, replaced by the familiar urge to fix things that were broken. He sat down as well, leaning forward in his chair. Look, he said, I don't know anything about your people or your customs or what constitutes honor in your culture. But I know ships, and I know that this one doesn't want to die. It's been fighting to stay alive for 14 months, trying to repair itself even when it barely has power to maintain life support. Ships like that deserve a second chance. Kethvar looked at him with something that might have been hope. Even if what you say is true, the repairs would be massive. The cost alone. Let me worry about the cost. You said you were a cargo captain, right? What kind of cargo? Rare minerals, mostly. Some technological components. My ship was designed for long-haul runs between systems. Marcus nodded. There's always demand for cargo capacity on Kepler Station. If I can get your ship flying again, you could work the trade routes, earn back your repair costs. He paused. And maybe earn back something else too. What do you mean? Marcus gestured around the bridge. This ship, your crew, that ambush, none of that was your fault. But sitting here waiting to die, that's a choice you're making. You want honor? Then stop choosing to die and start choosing to live. Kethvar was quiet for a long moment, his amber eyes studying Marcus's face. Finally, he spoke. Why would you do this? You do not know me. I am not your responsibility. Marcus thought about that. Why was he doing this? It would cost him his savings, probably his job, and definitely his peace of mind. But when he looked at the alien captain, all he could see was another creature that had been abandoned by those who should have cared. Because, he said finally, everyone deserves someone who won't give up on them. Kethvar's ears perked up slightly. You would truly attempt this? Even knowing the odds of success are minimal. The odds of success are only minimal if you don't try hard enough, Marcus replied. I've been fixing broken things my whole life. Your ship's just another broken thing that needs fixing. For the first time since Marcus had met him, Kethvar smiled. It was a strange sight on his wolf-like features, but it transformed his entire face. Very well, Marcus Chun of the humans. If you're willing to try, then perhaps I am willing to hope. Marcus grinned and pulled out his tablet. Then, let's start with a full systems diagnostic. I want to know exactly what we're working with here. As they began their assessment of the ship's condition, neither of them realized that they were about to embark on something much larger than a simple repair job. They were about to prove that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe isn't technology or weapons or even courage. Sometimes it's simply the refusal to let something good stay broken. 3 days into the repair project, Marcus was beginning to understand why the original salvage crew had walked away from Kethvar's ship. The vessel, which he'd learned was called the Howling Wind, wasn't just damaged. It was a masterpiece of alien engineering that had been subjected to the mechanical equivalent of torture. The reactor core was indeed cracked, but not in the way human reactors cracked. Instead of a simple structural failure, the Lickery power system seemed to have been designed to fail gracefully, with the core developing what looked like organic scar tissue over the damaged areas. It was still functional, but operating at less than 10% efficiency, like a heart with several blocked arteries. Your people certainly build things differently, Marcus muttered, wedged halfway into the reactor housing with a scanner in one hand and a makeshift repair tool in the other. The space was cramped even by human standards, and he couldn't imagine how Lickery engineers normally service their equipment. We build for longevity, Kethvar's voice crackled through the comm system. Lickery ships are expected to operate for centuries with minimal maintenance. The Wind is actually quite young, only 47 years old. Marcus nearly dropped his scanner. 47 years old, and you call it young? By Lickery's standards, yes. My grandfather's ship is over 200 years old and still in active service. That explained a lot about the ship's design philosophy. Every system Marcus had examined was built with redundancy upon redundancy, with materials that seemed designed to repair themselves given enough time and proper maintenance. The problem was that the original damage had been so severe that the self-repair systems couldn't keep up, creating a cascading failure that left the ship slowly consuming itself. But there was something else Marcus had noticed during his 3 days of crawling through the ship's guts. The Howling Wind wasn't just well-built, it was loved. Every surface showed signs of careful maintenance. Every component had been upgraded and refined over the decades. Someone, probably multiple generations of someone's, had poured their hearts into making the ship not just functional, but perfect. Kethvar, Marcus said, emerging from the reactor housing covered in grease and what looked like metallic dust. Tell me about your family. The alien captain looked up from the nutrition paste he'd been slowly eating. Marcus had brought enough emergency rations to last both of them for weeks, but Kethvar insisted on eating as little as possible, claiming he wasn't used to eating regularly anymore. My family? Why do you ask? This ship has been modified extensively. The work is too consistent, too careful to be done by different crews. Someone's been upgrading her for decades. Kethvar's expression softened. The Howling Wind has been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather, Deathvar, bought her new from his shipyards on Lycos Prime. My father, Rethvar, made his fortune running cargo between the outer colonies. When he retired, he passed her to me. And you've been making your own modifications. Small ones. Better navigation systems, upgraded cargo handling equipment, improved crew quarters. Kethvar's ears drooped slightly. I had hoped to pass her on to my own offspring someday, but that seems unlikely now. Marcus wiped his hands on a rag and sat down across from the alien captain. Over the past 3 days, they'd fallen into an easy working relationship. Kethvar knew every system on the ship intimately, while Marcus brought a fresh perspective and human ingenuity to problems that had seemed insurmountable. Why unlikely? Even if you succeed in repairing the wind, I am still in exile. The clan council has almost certainly declared me dead by now. My assets have been redistributed, my family name struck from the registry. I have no clan, no status, no future. Marcus frowned. That seems pretty permanent for what sounds like bad luck, rather than actual failure. You do not understand Lickery culture. We are warriors first, traitors second. A warrior who loses his crew, his ship, his mission, such a warrior has no place among us. Kethvar's claws extended again, the metallic sound echoing in the quiet bridge. Better to die with honor than live with shame. There's that honor thing again, Marcus said. You keep talking about honor like it's more important than being alive. For my people, it is. Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking. He'd grown up in a culture that valued pragmatism over pride, results over reputation. The idea of choosing death over dishonor was alien to him, but he was beginning to understand how deeply ingrained it was in Kethvar's worldview. What if you could get your honor back? Kethvar's ears perked up. What do you mean? Well, you lost your crew and cargo in an ambush, right? That wasn't your fault. And you've been keeping your family ship alive for over a year under impossible conditions. That sounds pretty honorable to me. But the council made their decision based on incomplete information. They thought you were dead, probably thought the ship was destroyed. What if you showed up with the wind fully operational and ready for service? What if you proved that reports of your death were greatly exaggerated? Kethvar considered this, his amber eyes thoughtful. It is possible that the council might reconsider if I returned with proof that I had not simply fled in cowardice. But the ship would need to be more than merely functional. It would need to be perfect, a testament to my dedication and skill. Then, that's what we'll do, Marcus said simply. We'll make her perfect. Over the following days, the repair work intensified. Marcus had quietly transferred his entire savings account to fund the project, using his contacts throughout Kepler Station to acquire parts and materials. Some components were standard enough that human equivalents would work with minor modifications. Others required creative solutions that pushed both their ingenuity and their resources. The reactor core proved to be the biggest challenge. Marcus had initially hoped to simply patch the existing cracks and boost the output, but Kethvar insisted that a partial repair wouldn't be sufficient. If I am to face the council, the wind must be operating at full capacity, he explained as they studied the damaged core. Anything less would be seen as accepting mediocrity. Marcus stared at the reactor housing, mentally calculating the cost of a complete rebuild. It would require materials worth more than most people saw in a lifetime, and that was assuming they could even find the right components for an alien power system. There might be another way, he said slowly. What if we don't just repair the reactor? What if we upgrade it? Kethvar's ears tilted forward. Explain. Human fusion technology has come a long way in the past few decades. Our reactors are smaller, more efficient, and more reliable than anything we had when first contact was made. If we could adapt a human power core to work with your ship's systems, the power output would be insufficient. Lickery ships require enormous amounts of energy to operate their shielding and propulsion systems. Marcus grinned. Not if we use a military-grade reactor. I know a guy who works decommissioning old Navy ships. They're always looking for ways to dispose of old power cores safely. 3 days later, they were staring at a fusion reactor that had once powered a human dreadnought. It was massive, complex, and completely incompatible with Lickery technology, but Marcus had never met an engineering problem he couldn't solve given enough time and coffee. This is insane, Kethvar muttered. watching Marcus weld power coupling to alien conduits. You are attempting to mate technologies from two completely different schools of engineering. Insane is what I do best, Marcus replied, not looking up from his work. Besides, both systems are based on the same fundamental principles. Energy is energy, whether it's generated by human fusion or liquery matter conversion. The integration took 2 weeks of round-the-clock work. Marcus barely slept, sustained by caffeine and stubbornness, while HFY proved surprisingly adept at human engineering principles. The alien captain's large hands were actually an advantage when working with heavy components, and his intimate knowledge of the ship's systems helped them avoid dozens of potential compatibility issues. "Try it now," Marcus said finally, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. HFY's claws danced over the alien control surfaces, bringing the hybrid power system online for the first time. The lights on the bridge flickered, then steadied, then began to glow with a warm intensity they hadn't shown since Marcus had first come aboard. Throughout the ship, systems that had been dormant for months began to wake up. Environmental controls engaged, restoring proper atmosphere and temperature to compartments that had been slowly freezing. Artificial gravity stabilized, ending the subtle list that had made walking through the corridors a constant challenge. Most importantly, the self-repair systems came back online, and Marcus could hear the ship beginning to heal itself as nanoscale mechanisms went to work on minor damage throughout the hull. Power output is at 112% of original specifications, HFY reported, his voice filled with wonder. The wind has never operated at such levels. Marcus allowed himself a moment of satisfaction before consulting his tablet. Good, because we're going to need every bit of that power. The hull repairs are going to be the next major challenge. The damage to the ship's port side was extensive, with several hull breaches that had been temporarily sealed by the ship's emergency systems. But, here again, the hybrid approach proved advantageous. Marcus used human welding techniques to create strong, reliable patches, while HFY's knowledge of liquery metallurgy ensured that the repairs would integrate seamlessly with the ship's self-healing hull. As they worked, they talked. Marcus learned about liquery culture, their complex clan structure, their centuries-old traditions of honor and warfare. HFY learned about human pragmatism, the way his species approached problems with creativity and determination rather than rigid adherence to established methods. "Your people are strange," HFY said one day as they worked on replacing a damaged sensor array. "You see a problem and immediately begin thinking of ways to solve it, regardless of whether anyone has ever solved such a problem before." "And your people are strange," Marcus replied, carefully aligning a new component. "You see a problem and immediately begin thinking about the proper, honorable way to fail at solving it." HFY's laughter boomed through the corridor. "Perhaps that is why this partnership works so well. Your irreverence balances my reverence." But it was more than just cultural differences that made their partnership effective. As the days turned into weeks, Marcus began to understand that HFY was more than just a competent ship captain. He was a master engineer in his own right, with an intuitive understanding of complex systems that complemented Marcus's more analytical approach. "You should have been an engineer instead of a cargo hauler," Marcus said one afternoon as they completed the installation of a new navigation array. "I was trained as an engineer," HFY replied. "All liquery captains are required to understand every system on their ships. How else could we maintain them during long voyages?" "But you chose cargo runs over military service?" HFY's expression grew distant. "Military service among the liquery is complicated. Our warrior culture prizes aggression, conquest, the domination of other species. I have never felt comfortable with such pursuits. Cargo hauling allowed me to see the galaxy without participating in its destruction." Marcus nodded, understanding a little better why HFY had been so devastated by the loss of his crew and mission. For someone who had chosen peace over war, the violent end of his trading expedition must have felt like a betrayal of everything he believed in. "Well," Marcus said, "maybe when we get the wind flying again, You can go back to peaceful cargo runs. Perhaps, Kethvar said, though I suspect the galaxy may have other plans for us. He was more right than either of them knew. As they worked on the final repairs to the ship's systems, neither Marcus nor Kethvar noticed the increased traffic around Kepler Station. Ships were arriving daily, many bearing the distinctive markings of the Lickery Empire. Word was spreading through the galactic community about the impossible repair job taking place in Section 7 Delta, about the human who was bringing a dead alien ship back to life. Some of those arriving ships carried traders and engineers curious about the hybrid technologies being developed. Others carried diplomats, interested in the potential for human-Lickery cooperation. But a few carried representatives of the Clan Council, come to investigate reports that Kethvar of the Broken Fong was still alive. The reckoning was coming, whether they were ready for it or not. The first sign that something had changed came when Station Commander Rodriguez showed up at the Howling Winds docking bay unannounced. Marcus was elbow-deep in the ship's navigation console, making final adjustments to the new sensor integration, when he heard unfamiliar voices echoing through the corridors. "Chun, where the hell are you?" Marcus extracted himself from the console and made his way to the main airlock, where he found Rodriguez standing with two figures he didn't recognize. One was clearly human, wearing the crisp uniform of a Galactic Trade Commission inspector. The other was Lickery, but unlike Kethvar, this one wore elaborate ceremonial armor that marked him as someone of significant rank. "Commander," Marcus said carefully, "what brings you to my little project?" Rodriguez's expression was grim. "Your little project has attracted some rather significant attention. This is Inspector Walsh from the GTC and War Captain Zeth Moore of the Lickery Imperial Navy." The Lickery captain stepped forward, his amber eyes studying Marcus with obvious distrust. Where Kethvar was lean and scholarly despite his size, this alien radiated control violence. His armor was polished to a mirror finish, and the ceremonial weapons at his side looked very functional indeed. "You are the human who claims to have repaired the Howling Wind," Zethmore said, his English heavily accented but precise. "I'm the human who has repaired her," Marcus replied. "Along with her captain, Kethvar." Zethmore's ears flattened against his skull. "Kethvar of the Broken Fong has been declared dead by the Clan Council. His ship was condemned as a total loss. Yet you claim otherwise." "I claim what I can prove," Marcus said, his temper beginning to rise. "The ship is fully operational, and her captain is very much alive." Inspector Walsh cleared his throat. "Mr. Chun, there are some irregularities with your salvage claim that we need to discuss. The value of the repairs you've made exceeds your registered assets by a factor of 10. The GTC needs to understand how you've funded this project." Marcus felt his stomach drop. He'd been so focused on the technical challenges that he'd completely ignored the bureaucratic ones. "I used my savings and took out some loans." "Loans from whom?" Walsh's tablet was already recording everything. "Our preliminary investigation shows no record of any legitimate lending institution providing you with the capital necessary for this repair job." Before Marcus could answer, Kethvar's voice boomed from deeper within the ship. "Marcus? Who are our visitors?" The Lickery captain's reaction was immediate and dramatic. His hand went to his sidearm, his posture shifting into a combat stance. "That voice!" "Kethvar, come to the airlock, please," Marcus called out, keeping his own voice steady despite the tension radiating from the armored alien. When Kethvar appeared, the temperature in the docking bay seemed to drop several degrees. He was no longer the half-starved, defeated Captain Marcus had first met 6 weeks ago. Regular meals and purposeful work had filled out his frame, and his amber eyes now held the confident gleam of someone who had found his place in the universe again. But, more importantly, he moved with the easy grace of someone aboard his own ship in his own domain. "War Captain Zeth Moore," Kethvar said formally, offering a slight bow. "I am surprised to see you so far from the Imperial fleet." "As I am surprised to see you anywhere but dead," Zeth Moore replied coldly. "The Council declared you lost with all hands 14 months ago. Your failure at Zelani Prime was deemed complete. Kethvar's ears flattened, but his voice remained steady. As you can see, reports of my death were somewhat premature. Were they? Or have you simply been hiding in shame, too cowardly to return home and face judgment? The accusation hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus could see Kethvar struggling with his response, the old patterns of shame and self-doubt warring with the confidence he'd rebuilt over the past weeks. "I've not been hiding," Kethvar said finally. "I have been healing, both myself and my ship." "Your ship was declared unsalvageable." The preliminary assessment was wrong," Marcus interrupted, earning startled looks from all three aliens. "Your people took one look at the damage, decided it was too much work, and walked away. They didn't bother to understand what they were looking at." Zeth Moore turned his attention back to Marcus, his expression dangerous. "You dare criticize Lickery engineering assessment?" "I criticize lazy engineering assessment," Marcus shot back. "Your people saw a cracked reactor core and assumed the ship was finished. They didn't look deeper, didn't understand the self-repair capabilities, didn't appreciate the elegant redundancy built into every system. They gave up because giving up was easier than doing the work." Marcus, Kethvar wanted quietly. But Marcus was on a roll now, his anger at the bureaucratic interference combining with weeks of frustration at Kethvar's cultural hang-ups. "And you," he said, pointing at Zeth Moore, "you're here to what? Drag him home to face punishment for having the audacity to survive? For refusing to die quietly when it would have been more convenient for your counsel?" Zeth Moore's hand was definitely on his weapon now. "You know nothing of our ways, human. I know that your ways nearly got a good ship and a good captain killed for no reason other than pride and paperwork." Marcus snapped. "I know that in the 6 weeks I've been working with Kethvar, he's shown more engineering skill, more dedication, and more honor than any of the so-called experts who condemned his ship." "Enough." Commander Rodriguez stepped between them before the situation could escalate further. "Chun, stand down." "War Captain, I'll thank you to remember that you're a guest on this station." Inspector Walsh was studying his tablet with obvious confusion. "Mr. Chun, our records show that you've purchased components worth over 2 million credits in the past 6 weeks. Yet your personal assets amount to less than 50,000 credits. Where did the money come from?" Marcus looked around at the faces watching him. Rodriguez was clearly trying to figure out whether Marcus had done something illegal. Walsh was building a case for financial irregularities. Zeth Moore was looking for any excuse to drag Kethvar away in disgrace. And Kethvar was watching Marcus with something that looked like pride. "Show them," Kethvar said quietly. "Show them what?" "Show them what we have built together. Show them that the Howling Wind is more than merely repaired. Show them why their assessments were wrong." Marcus looked at his friend, and somewhere over the past weeks, that's what Kethvar had become, despite the differences in species and culture, and saw the quiet confidence in his amber eyes. "All right," Marcus said, "but we do this properly. Full systems test, complete flight profile, the works." "The ship is not cleared for independent flight," Inspector Walsh protested. "The paperwork alone. The ship is cleared for emergency status flights under humanitarian protocols," Commander Rodriguez interrupted, pulling out his own tablet. "And as station commander, I'm authorizing a full systems test. We need to know what we're dealing with here." 30 minutes later, they were all strapped into various seats on the Howling Winds Bridge. Marcus had insisted that everyone witness the test flight personally, partly to prove the ship's capabilities, and partly because he was curious to see how Zeth Moore would react to what they'd accomplished. "All systems show green across the board," Kethvar reported from the captain's chair. "Reactor output steady at 110% of original specifications. All hull integrity checks passed. Navigation and communication systems fully operational. Docking clamps released." Marcus added from the engineering station they'd rigged up for him. "We are free and clear for maneuvering." The Howling Wind lifted away from Kepler Station with a grace that surprised everyone aboard. Despite her size, the ship moved like a much smaller vessel, responding instantly to Kethvar's commands. The hybrid propulsion system provided both the power and efficiency of human fusion technology with the sophisticated maneuvering capabilities that Lickery engineers had perfected over centuries. Impressive, Zethmore admitted grudgingly as they cleared the station's traffic control zone. The response time is notably improved from standard specifications. The human reactor provides significantly more power than our traditional cores, Kethvar explained, executing a series of test maneuvers that would have challenged ships half the wind size. But, more importantly, the human engineer approached our systems without preconceptions about what was possible. They spent an hour putting the ship through her paces. Sublight acceleration tests showed performance 20% above the original specifications. Maneuvering trials demonstrated improvements in response time and precision that impressed even the skeptical Lickery captain. Most importantly, all systems operated flawlessly, with none of the minor glitches and inefficiencies that typically plagued even brand-new vessels. "How?" Zethmore asked finally, as they returned to the station. "How did you achieve such results with a ship that was declared beyond repair?" "We listened to what the ship was trying to tell us," Marcus said. "Every system, every component, every failure mode. They were all symptoms of an underlying problem that no one had bothered to diagnose properly." "And what was that problem?" Kethvar and Marcus exchanged a look. "The ship was dying of loneliness," Kethvar said. "Lickery vessels are designed to be partnered with their crews, to grow and adapt over years of service. When my crew was killed, the wind began to shut down, not just mechanically, but spiritually. The self-repair systems couldn't function properly because they had no guidance, no purpose." "That's ridiculous," Zethmore said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. "Is it?" Marcus asked. "Your own records show that Lickery ships serve for centuries with minimal maintenance when properly crewed, but fail rapidly when abandoned. The Wind wasn't just damaged by the ambush. She was heartbroken." Inspector Walsh looked up from his tablet with obvious confusion. "Are you saying the ship is alive?" "Not alive exactly," Marcus said, "but not entirely mechanical either. Lickery biotechnology integrates organic and mechanical systems in ways that human science is only beginning to understand. The ship forms a symbiotic relationship with her crew, which is why," Kethvar added, "the standard repair protocols failed. You cannot heal a broken heart with replacement parts and system patches. You need care, attention, and, most importantly, hope for the future." As they docked back at Kepler Station, Marcus could see that something fundamental had shifted in the dynamic between the three officials. Zethmore was studying the ship's performance data with obvious interest. Inspector Walsh was recording everything, but his questions had shifted from accusations to genuine curiosity. Even Commander Rodriguez seemed impressed by what they'd accomplished. "I will need to make a full report to the Clan Council," Zethmore said as they gathered in the ship's main lounge. This changes many things." "What kind of changes?" Kethvar asked. Zethmore considered his words carefully. "A captain who can coax such performance from a damaged vessel, who can inspire such loyalty from an alien engineer, who can achieve results that our own experts deemed impossible. Such a captain may have more value than the Council initially assessed." "And the charges?" "What charges?" "You were ambushed by enemy forces, fought bravely, and have spent the intervening time restoring your vessel to better-than-new condition." Zethmore's smile was sharp, but not unfriendly. "If anything, the Council owes you an apology for writing you off so quickly." Inspector Walsh cleared his throat. "There's still the matter of the financing irregularities." "What irregularities?" Marcus asked innocently. "The components, the materials, the labor costs. Our estimates show expenditures in excess of 2 million credits." Marcus grinned and pulled out his tablet, showing Walsh a transaction record. "I sold the salvage rights to several components from other wrecks in the yard. Turns out, alien technology brings premium prices when properly refurbished." It wasn't entirely true. Marcus had indeed sold salvage rights, but nowhere near enough to cover the actual costs. The rest had come from his savings, emergency loans, and a few favors called in with suppliers who trusted his reputation. But the paperwork was clean, and the story was plausible enough to satisfy the bureaucrats. And the human reactor? Zethmore asked. Purchased legitimately from military surplus, Commander Rodriguez said, consulting his own records. The Navy was happy to have someone take it off their hands rather than paying for proper disposal. As the officials prepared to leave, Zethmore turned back to Kethvar one last time. The council will want to meet with you, of course, to hear your full report on the Zalani incident and to assess your current status. When? Soon. But not, I think, as a defendant facing judgment. More likely as an expert consultant who has valuable insights to share. Zethmore's expression grew serious. The galaxy is changing, Kethvar. The old ways of doing things are proving insufficient for new challenges. Perhaps it is time for the Liquori to learn from species like the humans, who see problems as opportunities rather than defeats. After the officials left, Marcus and Kethvar sat in the ship's lounge, sharing a bottle of something alcoholic that Kethvar had been saving for a special occasion. So, Marcus said, sounds like you get to go home after all. It appears so, Kethvar replied. Though I suspect home will be different now. I'm different now. Different how? Kethvar considered the question, staring out at the stars through the lounge's viewport. When I first met you, I believed that honor came from following tradition, from never failing, from dying rather than accepting defeat. But you show me something else. What's that? You showed me that sometimes the most honorable thing you can do is refuse to accept that something is broken beyond repair. That sometimes honor means fighting for what you believe in, even when everyone else tells you to give up. Marcus raised his glass. To not giving up. To not giving up, Kethvar agreed. But even as they celebrated their success, neither of them realized that their partnership was about to face its greatest test. The reports filed by Zethmore, Walsh, and Rodriguez had reached more than just the Liquori clan council. They had also been intercepted by Zalanti intelligence, who were very interested to learn that the crew they thought they had eliminated was not only alive, but had somehow achieved impossible improvements to their ship's capabilities. And the Zalanti had never been the type to leave loose ends untied. The attack came without warning, just as Marcus and Kethvar were preparing for their departure to Liquori space. They were running final systems checks when the station's emergency klaxons began wailing, followed immediately by Commander Rodriguez's voice over the communication system. All civilian vessels are ordered to immediate dock down. This is not a drill. We have multiple hostile contacts approaching the station. Marcus looked up from his console to find Kethvar already studying the tactical displays. The alien captain's expression was grim as he processed the sensor data. Zalanti warships, Kethvar said quietly. 3 heavy cruisers and multiple escort vessels. They're not here for a social visit. How do they find us? Intelligence networks, most likely. The reports filed by Inspector Walsh and War Captain Zethmore would have traveled through multiple channels. Someone clearly shared that information with parties who should not have received it. Marcus felt his stomach clench with familiar anger. They're here for you. They are here to finish what they started at Zalani Prime. A living witness to their ambush would be inconvenient for their diplomatic relations with the Liquori Empire. The communications system crackled to life again, but this time it wasn't Rodriguez's voice. The speaker had a sibilant quality that marked it as non-human, and the accent was one Marcus didn't recognize. Kepler Station Control, this is Admiral Essie Katar of the Zalani Republic Navy. We are here on a diplomatic mission to recover stolen property that is currently harbored on your station. Stolen property? Rodriguez's voice was tight with controlled anger. What's stolen property? The vessel known as the Howling Wind and its surviving crew member. They were involved in piracy operations against Republic shipping and fled justice. We demand their immediate surrender. Marcus Kethvar? Piracy? That's bullshit, and they know it. Truth is often less important than convenience in diplomatic matters, Kethvar replied. The Zalanti are providing the Liquori Council with an excuse to disavow my actions. It would be easier for everyone if I simply disappeared. Not everyone, Marcus said grimly, his hands moving over the ship's control systems. Rodriguez isn't going to hand you over without a fight. And neither am I. Marcus, you must not. I must not what? Let them kill you for being inconvenient. Let them destroy everything we've built here. Marcus began bringing the wind's systems online, ignoring Kethvar's protests. We've proven that your ship is better than anything they have. Time to prove that her crew is too. Rodriguez's voice cut through their argument. Asterisk howling wind asterisk. This is station control. You're ordered to remain docked and power down all systems immediately. Marcus keyed the communication system. Station control. This is Marcus Chun aboard the Howling Wind. Respectfully requesting permission to undock and engage hostile forces. Negative wind. You are civilians and this is a military matter. With respect, Commander, this is a military matter that started with an illegal ambush on a civilian cargo vessel. We have a stake in how it ends. There was a long pause before Rodriguez responded. Chin, what exactly are you proposing? Marcus looked at Kethvar, who had been listening to the exchange with growing amazement. The alien captain nodded slowly, understanding passing between them. We're proposing to show the Zelani what happens when they pick on the wrong ship, Marcus said. Another pause. Then, Rodriguez's voice, tinged with what might have been admiration. Asterisk howling wind asterisk. You are cleared for emergency undock. Try not to start an interstellar war. No promises, Marcus replied, beginning the undocking sequence. The howling wind separated from Kepler Station just as the Zelani fleet moved into attack position. Marcus had never been in a space battle before, but Kethvar moved with the fluid precision of someone who understood both his ship and his enemy intimately. The Zelani favor overwhelming firepower over maneuverability, Kethvar explained as he plotted an intercept course. They will expect us to either flee or attempt to hide behind the station's defenses. They will not expect a frontal assault from a single ship. Because that would be insane, Kethvar confirmed with a fierce grin that showed all of his fangs. Fortunately, you have taught me that insanity can be quite effective when properly applied. The first exchange of fire came as the wind closed to weapons range. The Zelandi cruisers opened up with massive energy cannons designed to cripple capital ships, while their escort vessels spread out to surround the lone Lickery vessel. But the Howling Wind was no longer just a Lickery vessel. The human fusion reactor provided power levels that allowed Kethvar to push the shields and weapon systems far beyond their original specifications. More importantly, the hybrid modifications had given the ship capabilities that no Zelani tactical computer could predict. Evasive maneuvers, Kethvar ordered, his claws dancing over the control surfaces. The ship rolled and twisted through space with an elegance that seemed impossible for something her size. Energy beams that should have connected with solid hull instead sizzled harmlessly past, while the wind's return fire struck with devastating precision. How are you doing that? Marcus asked, watching the tactical display as they somehow avoided being hit by attacks from multiple directions. The human reactor provides enough power to run both the inertial dampeners and the maneuvering thrusters at maximum simultaneously, Kethvar replied, not looking away from his controls. Normally, we must choose between comfort and performance. Today, we choose both. The first Zelani escort ship exploded in a spectacular fireball as the wind's enhanced weapons systems overwhelmed its shields. The second tried to flee but found itself outmaneuvered by a ship that should have been too large for such precise control. But the real test came when they faced the heavy cruisers. These were purpose-built warships with armor and shielding designed to withstand sustained attacks from entire fleets. Against a single ship, even an enhanced one, they should have been invulnerable. Marcus, Kethvar said, his voice calm despite the chaos around them. I need you to do something that no Lickery engineer would ever attempt. What's that? I need you to overload the reactor. Marcus stared at him. That could destroy the ship. It will destroy the ship if we do it wrong. But if we do it right, Kethvar's smile was positively predatory. If we do it right, we will have enough power to punch through their shields and end this quickly. Marcus looked at the engineering displays, calculating risks and probabilities. What Kethvar was proposing was technically possible, but it would require precise timing and a level of coordination that they'd never attempted before. How long do you need? 30 seconds of maximum power output. Can you give me that? I can give you that, Marcus replied, his hands moving to override the reactor's safety systems. But after 30 seconds, we either win or we all become part of the local solar radiation. Then we had better win. Marcus began the overload sequence, watching as power levels climbed far beyond anything the ship had ever experienced. The lights on the bridge flickered, then blazed with painful intensity. Throughout the ship, systems that had been operating at their limits suddenly found themselves with unlimited energy to work with. Now, Kethvar said quietly, the howling wind became something that had never existed before in the galaxy. A cargo vessel with the firepower of a battleship. Energy beams that could have cracked a moon lanced out from the ship's enhanced weapons, striking the lead Zelani cruiser with devastating effect. Shields that had been designed to withstand fleet actions collapsed instantly, and the ship's hull began to buckle under the assault. But that was only the beginning. Kethvar used the ship's enhanced maneuverability to stay ahead of the remaining cruiser's return fire, while continuing to pour energy into their defenses. One by one, the massive warships found their shields failing, their weapon systems overloading, their hulls cracking under the impossible assault from a ship they had dismissed as insignificant. 25 seconds, Marcus called out, sweat beading on his forehead as he struggled to keep the reactor from destroying itself. The second cruiser exploded, its magazine detonating in a chain reaction that lit up the space around Kepler Station. The third tried to retreat, but found itself pursued by a ship that could somehow match its acceleration while maintaining devastating fire. 30 seconds, Marcus announced, beginning the emergency shutdown sequence. The howling wind's weapons fell silent as Marcus brought the reactor back within safe parameters. But the damage was done. 2 Zelani cruisers were drifting wrecks. The third was limping away with massive damage, and the escort vessels had either been destroyed or had fled the battlefield entirely. Zelani fleet, this is Captain Kethvar of the Howling Wind. The alien captain broadcast on all frequencies. Your unprovoked attack on this neutral station has been repelled. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The response came from Admiral Essi himself, his voice shaking with rage. This is not over, Lickery Dog. The Republic will not forget this insult. The Republic should remember this lesson, Kethvar replied calmly. The next time you consider ambushing innocent cargo vessels, consider also that some of us have friends who refuse to let such crimes go unpunished. As the surviving Zelani vessels jumped to hyperspace, Marcus slumped in his chair, exhausted by the adrenaline and effort of the battle. But Kethvar remained alert, studying the sensor readings and damage reports. Station control, this is the Howling Wind. Hostile forces have been repelled. Requesting damage assessment and casualty reports. Asterisk Howling Wind asterisk. This is Rodriguez. No casualties on the station. Minimal damage to docking facilities. I'm about to say, that was some impressive flying. The ship performed admirably, Kethvar replied. As did her engineer. Marcus felt a warm glow at the praise, but it was immediately overshadowed by practical concerns. What happens now? The Zelani aren't going to just forget about this. No, Kethvar agreed. But they will think twice before attempting another direct assault. And the Lickery Council. He paused, checking an incoming message on his personal communicator. The Lickery Council has just transmitted new orders. What kind of orders? Kethvar's expression was one Marcus had never seen before. A mixture of pride, amazement, and something that might have been vindication. I'm ordered to report to Lycos Prime immediately for a full briefing on my experiences with human technology and engineering practices. It seems the Council is very interested in the tactical applications of our collaboration. They want to know how we did what we just did. They want to know if it can be replicated. If human-Lickery cooperation could provide strategic advantages in future conflicts. Kethvar turned to face Marcus directly. They also want to know if you would be interested in a consulting position with the Lickery Imperial Navy. Marcus blinked. They want you to work for your military? They want you to teach our engineers how to think like humans, how to approach problems without preconceptions, how to find solutions that others would dismiss as impossible. Kethvar's smile was warm and genuine. They want you to show them what you showed me. That honor sometimes means refusing to accept defeat, even when defeat seems inevitable. Marcus looked around the bridge of the Howling Wind, at the display showing their impossible victory over a superior force, at the alien controls he'd learned to operate, at the friend he'd made despite differences in species and culture. What about the ship? What about us? The ship will be assigned to a new mission, exploring the possibilities of human-Lickery technological cooperation. As for us, Kethvar stood, offering Marcus his hand in a very human gesture he'd learned over their weeks together. I believe the humans have a saying about partnerships that work well together. Marcus grinned and shook the offered hand. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Precisely. Though in our case, perhaps it should be. If you can fix the broken, anything is possible. 6 months later, Marcus found himself aboard the Howling Wind as she dropped out of hyperspace near a planet that had suffered massive damage from a natural disaster. The ship's cargo holds were packed with relief supplies, but, more importantly, her crew included both human and Lickery engineers working together to develop new technologies for disaster response. Kethvar, now bearing the rank of exploration captain in the Lickery Navy, studied the planet's readings with the same careful attention he'd once given to cargo manifests. The seismic activity has destabilized the primary population centers, he reported. Conventional relief efforts will be insufficient. Then, we'll have to be unconventional, Marcus replied, already pulling up schematics for the portable fusion reactors they developed. How many people are we talking about? Approximately 2 million refugees in need of immediate shelter and power. Marcus whistled low. It was a massive undertaking, the kind of challenge that would have seemed impossible just a year ago. But that was before he'd learned that impossible was just another word for nobody's tried hard enough yet. All right, he said, rolling up his sleeves. Let's get to work. As the Howling Wind moved into orbit around the devastated planet, her mixed crew preparing for their largest relief operation yet, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed since that morning when he'd found a dying alien ship in the salvage yards. He'd started out trying to fix a broken ship and had ended up helping to forge a new kind of partnership between species that had barely known each other existed. He'd discovered that the greatest achievements came not from following established procedures, but from refusing to accept that some things couldn't be fixed. Most importantly, he learned that sometimes the most profound act of friendship was simply refusing to give up on someone, even when they'd given up on themselves. The universe was full of broken things, Marcus knew. Ships, people, entire civilizations that had lost their way or suffered devastating setbacks. But he'd also learned that with enough patience, creativity, and stubborn refusal to accept defeat, almost anything could be repaired. And if you were very lucky, you might even find that the process of fixing something broken had fixed something inside yourself as well. The Howling Wind descended toward the planet's surface, her human and Lickery crew working in perfect harmony to bring hope to those who had lost everything. Behind them, the stars watched with ancient patience, waiting to see what impossible thing they would accomplish next. After all, in a universe full of broken things, there was always more work to be done.